I think we got to leave you.
I can ride my bike with no handlebars.
Greetings, moto guys and moto gals, and welcome back to the 333. And of course, on the best curve that I'm coming into, I have a slow ass pickup truck in front of me. And don't touch your dials, boys and girls. You're not hallucinating. I am on the Tenere today, and goodbye. Yeah, I have hit the 1,000 mile mark on the Tenere, and figured I would do a full bike review. And I know all the people who've been subscribing to my channel, who subscribe and have been following, are probably like, no, not another Tenere video. Yes, it'll be this video, and I may do some footage from my Pine Barrens adventure riding class, which I'm taking next weekend on this bike. That'll probably be about it for the Tenere content for a little while. I have hit the 1,000 mile mark on this bike, which seems pretty quick, but looking back, really not. I got the bike in October, rode it a few times in the fall, didn't really get out on it much. Did my one memorable crash vest in the Pine Barrens. Hello there. Got on a few kind of basic rides, and then the thing kind of sat in the garage. Well, it didn't really sit in the garage. I did a lot of tweaks to the bike in the garage over the winter time. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good on it now, man. The bike feels fantastic. So I figured at the 1,000 mark, I would do I haven't really done a complete review of the bike yet, because I've really still been just kind of figuring out how I feel about it. I mean, to be honest with you, I've still been sort of trying to gather my thoughts about how I exactly feel about this bike. It's definitely not a straightaway kind of feeling like I have with the CB1000R, right, with the Beaver. I completely gelled with the CB1000R. I love that bike, and my reviews are pretty much predictable. But this bike is called the Mule for a reason, and it's called the Mule because it's very similar to a mule in a lot of regards. And you know, anybody who likes mules or donkeys knows they can be cute and friendly and fun, and they can also fucking kick you in the teeth. That's kind of what this bike is like. It has a really complex character, man. And I'm gonna try to verbalize that in this review as best as I can. I want to go through what I really like about the bike, what I really hate about the bike, and then of course what I usually do in my bike reviews is I put those kind of neutral things in there that are really not good or bad, but probably things you want to be aware of if you're going to buy this bike. The very first thing that I think is a negative about this bike is the hype. Is the bike worth the hype? And I would say to you, I'm going to answer honestly. I'm not going to mince words. Anyone who is a Yamaha purist, I am not trying to insult you. And anyone who is a Tenere fanatic, I am not trying to insult you. Is it worth the hype? No. Is it worth waiting 6 months to get? Depends. Really depends. Looking back on it, would I have continued to wait 3 months for this bike? Yeah, I would have. I wasn't in any rush to get it. I knew I wanted it. You know, I figured if I got it by the fall, that would be cool. I figured I wasn't going to do the bulk of my ride until this year anyway. If you're really hot for this bike, if you've test ridden it and you know you want it, then yeah. If you're not sure about this bike, you might want to consider everything about it before you commit to waiting 3 to 6 months for this bike. You know, because I personally, I think it's a cool bike. It's definitely fun. I don't regret buying it. I don't think it's worth the hype. And now we're going to get into the specifics of why I don't think it's worth the hype. So right out of the block, the first thing that I would say is a glaring negative on this bike is the quality of the components on the bike. I would say, you know, aside from my negative opinion of the hype, the first thing that jumped out at me after owning this bike since October and riding it and doing some wrenching on it and seeing some of the other issues in the Tenere riders groups that people have been running into, I would say the first negative on my list is the quality of the components on the bike. They are subpar. This sucker, you can tell how Yamaha cut corners on this thing. And I'm not, you know, I'm not being a jerk on purpose, but there are some components on here that are just like, wow, like I look at it and I go, what the fuck were they thinking putting this on this bike? You know, the first obvious one was the big dorky Christmas bulb indicator lights. You know, they're just junk, man. They're just awful. They're like, so they cheap the bike up so much. They give it such a cheap feel. And you know, and then on the Tenere itself, there's other components on here that I was kind of disappointed with as I started getting into the bike to like set it up the way I wanted it and customize it. I started noticing that, you know, the quality of the components just is really like, you know, it's obvious how Yamaha kind of cut the costs on this bike. They skimped on a lot of the components. They really did. The other thing that you'll notice when you start going over the bike with a fine-tooth comb that is really cheap feeling is the hand guards, right? So these guards are an upgrade. These are the Barkbuster protectors. And again, I took the bike out initially, like, you know, in the first week, went into the Pine Barrens, had my, you know, dirt eating festival in the Pine Barrens. And the first thing that I noticed is, you know, the stock handguards were about as protective as like corrugated cardboard. I mean, seriously, they were just plastic. They had no kind of metal ribbing in them or anything. They were just absolute like kind of garbage, man. If you look at my navigation tower here, you know, next to my you know, my display, you'll see these two kind of you know, very quality looking bars running down the side. That is a third-party component. These are made by Camel ADV out of Canada, and this guy has built a business on the fact that the componentry on the T7 is garbage. I mean, he's making components for the bike because the regular components are like shit. So what do these bars do on the side of my display here? Well, they're called the anti-bobble kit, and if you don't put them on this display, like if I'm riding down this road and I didn't have the anti-bobble kit on, it would go like this, and you can't even read it. Like, really, Yamaha? If you go underneath the bike and you look at the stock bash plate, it's about as thin as a Coke can. Like, seriously, it's really thin grade. I don't know what it is, aluminum, maybe some kind of you know, thin grade steel. So again, another component that everybody upgrades right away, the bash plate. You know, just overall, I'm not impressed with the quality of the components. I think Yamaha really kind of skimped on the components, and that would be one of my big glaring negatives. The third thing that I would consider negative is the bike has several glaring design flaws on it. Several glaring design flaws. Again, people that own the Tenere, that are Tenere loyalists, they may disagree with me. You can go in the comments, trash me. This is my perspective on owning the bike for 1,000 miles, okay? Design flaw number one, which is well known, again, in the Tenere community. It is the hanger for the exhaust can. You can't see it. I'll do a walk around on the bike so you can see some of these things that I'm talking about. The hanger on the exhaust can is a really bad design, really bad design. It extends down from the frame. It doesn't bolt on. It's actually part of the frame. The exhaust can on this bike hangs really low, and I've already done it. Several people have done it. When you drop the bike on the right, you immediately bend the hanger, which doesn't just bend a part on the bike, it bends your fucking frame. So one design flaw, another design flaw on the bike is the way the front fender connects to the forks. Again, this was brought to my attention in the forums and in the groups that I belong to. Stock, the front fender has these boots that ride down the side of the forks, and it bolts into the actual fork with metal bolts. And what has happened to some people, unfortunately, is they took the bike in the rough terrain, they dropped it, and they sheared off those metal bolts and ended up fucking up the threads on the fork itself. The workaround, the solution is to use nylon replacement bolts, which I've done. I've put the nylon replacement bolts, but again, you know, Yamaha should be doing this. Another design flaw on the bike that I just saw of, and I don't know that there's a lot that Yamaha can do about this. I might be being unfair on this one, but for this type of bike and its purpose, I would consider this a design flaw. It is the location of the water pump. The water pump is very exposed on this bike and would be very easy to puncture in a fall, especially if you're in a rocky, rough terrain. I have put, crash protection on my bike, but I don't know that it's going to 100% protect the water pump. There are covers out there that you can get, but again, I feel like stock, being that this is an adventure bike, being that it's marketed for rougher terrain, I feel like Yamaha should have considered that in, the placement of the water pump. Now, the engine in this bike, which is one of the huge positives of this bike, and we'll get to those in a minute, I promise. The engine in this bike is an MT-07 engine. It's a street bike engine. So, to Yamaha's defense, are they going to redesign the engine to put in this bike? Probably not. Is the water pump something that could be redesigned on the engine easily? Probably not. What I do think they could have done is I think they could have put some sort of protection around it. You know what I mean? A covering on it, a deflector of some sort around it. They did it where the clutch ties in on the engine. It's got a deflector around it, and I think the water pump needs the same kind of thing. Okay, so what do we have so far? So far in the negative categories, kind of a lot, right? Kind of a lot. First negative, height. Second negative, quality of the components. Low. Third negative is design flaws, right? What would be the fourth negative? The fourth negative, definitely worth mention, and very surprising to me, quite frankly. But having owned the bike since October, and I think other Tenere owners are going to agree with me on this, the brakes on this bike suck. This bike has Brembos on it, and there's guys posting in the Tenere groups that they've only gotten 4,000 or 5,000 miles on the rear brakes on this bike. What's up with that, Yamaha? And the stopping power on the bikes it's not good. It's not really good. It's not crisp. It's not sharp. I do use the rear brake primarily on this bike. I've gotten used to it. I've gotten used to compensating for the length of time it takes to stop with the rear brake on this bike. So that is definitely another negative. The brakes, that's an important part on a motorcycle, right? Brakes are pretty important. So is that it for my shit list? I think that's probably about it for now. Again, I've only put 1,000 miles on the bike. I've not done any kind of long extended trips. So those are my initial detailed opinions on the bike, having ridden it for 1,000 miles and kind of gotten to know it a little bit better. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the good stuff, right? That's always more fun. It's easy to beat up something and kind of kick it. Let's talk about what's good about this bike. Okay, so top of my list on good stuff. And again, these are all debatable. This is just my list. Everybody else can have their own list. But number one on my list of good things on this bike, hands down, is the engine. The engine is a peach on this bike. I understand now why so many people love their FZ07s and MT-07s, because the engine is just phenomenal on this bike. It's ridiculously good. And that's kind of what, I guess, not what you're paying for, but that's the big selling point, I think, or should be, on this bike, is the engine and the performance. I mean, it's an adventure bike, but you can easily overtake cars like that. He wasn't going that fast, but it gets up to speed pretty quick. 72 horsepower. It's a performer, man. And on the street, it performs really well. Really well. All right. Next. The next positive thing about this bike would be, and I've said this before, and this is kind of I don't know, I feel like when I say this one, it's a cop-out, but I think it's valid. It's the price, right? The price on this bike is a very big positive thing. Now, I will say this, that I don't know that Yamaha is exclusive in its good pricing now on this level of bike. I think other competitors have since come out or will be coming out with their sort of answer to this bike, some of which may be better. I know, for example, Triumph has introduced a, I guess an 800 version, like a sport version of the Tiger, which looks really good. I think it's pretty close price-wise to this bike. So I think if I was in the market for a T7, I'd probably check out the Triumph Tiger 800 just to see how it stacked up. So again, I think Yamaha had some exclusivity for a year or two. They sort of found that unicorn niche for this bike for a year or two. I don't know that they hold that spot anymore, but the price is definitely appealing. For me, you know, the price was a big incentive to get this bike. You know, I don't want to just ride it back in the Pine Barrens on the fire roads. I do want to do some of that on it as well, but yeah, I want to do long trips on this bike. That's my goal on this, and that's why I figured at that price point, that's a great way to get into adventure biking without, you know, cutting off your arm, so to speak, and plunging down a ton of money on a bike, right? Third on the positive list, I would say, is the looks of the bike, right? The aesthetics. I love how this bike looks. I love it. The bike's an eye turner, like a head turner. I've gotten more comments on this bike just in the short time that I've owned it than actually on the CB1000R. I think the CB1000R is a cool looking bike, and I'm kind of surprised that more people don't sort of like give me a thumbs up on that bike, because I think it's pretty cool looking. I've gotten way more like thumbs ups on this bike, surprisingly, or maybe not, I don't know. But oh, sprinklers! All right, riding through the sprinklers. Yeah, so the looks of the bike definitely are a positive thing for sure. What else do we want to say? What else is a positive on this bike? I would say performance on the bike. Performance on the bike is good. It's a really good performer, man. The bike is a really good performer. I mean, you know, it's responsive. It's got the, you know, the MT-07 engine in it. It carves on the road for sure. It's a joy to ride on the asphalt. I love riding this bike on the asphalt. It's immensely fun to ride. It just carves up asphalt like awesome. And even though I put, you know, I changed my front tire and I put the Anarchy Wild 50/50 tire, which is kind of a truer knobby, it still carves, man. It still carves with that knobby on there. It's great. So yeah, so performance is definitely positive. Performance on the road, I can attest to, is phenomenal. Absolutely awesome. So if you plan on doing a lot of road riding, you want to do long adventure trips, it's a joy to ride. It's comfortable. It's got a really comfortable upright seating position on it. You know, I've taken the bike, I think the longest ride I've done on the bike so far in one shot has probably been about 200 miles, and it was easy. You know, it normally on the CB, if I do 200 miles, I'll get sore in my shoulders and my neck and my back. This bike, I think I could have went another 200 miles easily on that during the same day. So it's a really comfortable upright seating position. It has pretty good ergonomics on it. You know, I would say that's another positive, is the ergonomics on the bike. So, you know, is the windscreen awesome? No. Is it way better than a naked bike? Fuck yeah. It's so much better than a naked bike. You know? That's the one thing you know, you guys have heard me drone on in other videos of what the downside of a naked bike is. And one of the biggest downsides of a naked bike is you have no wind protection at all, right? And it sucks. This bike has pretty good wind protection, and I put an extender kit on it so that I can raise it up higher, and it works well. I get no buffeting on my head. Really comfortable. It shreds the wind kind of around me. You get a little bit, you know, you can still feel the presence of the wind, but it's nice. It's really nice, you know. So definitely the ergonomics of the bike are definitely a positive for sure. Another positive, and you can probably hear that, listen to that. That is that parallel twin, that 270 crank parallel twin. The exhaust note on this bike is phenomenal. I love it. It's got a great exhaust note on it. Probably not a reason to buy the bike, but I think it's pretty cool. It sounds great. People, you know, again, I think that's one of the reasons why I get the thumbs up. The bike just, you know, when you take off from a red light, it's got a really nice brat to it. You know what I mean? And it sounds great. It is a Yamaha through and through. And what I mean by that is, you know, Yamahas have a reputation for being twitchy bikes, twitchy, powerful, unforgiving bikes, right? And that goes back to their roots in both motocross and MotoGP. You know, the YZs will kick your ass at motocross. The R1 is a notoriously powerful, wicked bike, right? And that heritage, you know, kind of goes through Yamaha. And do they have nice, easy to ride bikes? Sure, they have great bikes. Yamaha has great bikes. This bike has the kind of notorious Yamaha characteristics to it. The throttle is very twitchy, especially in first gear. The bike, I don't know that the bike will wheelie, but it really kind of bucks you if you don't let out the clutch smoothly, if you don't apply the throttle smoothly. It does not like it, and it kind of gives you a nice buck to remind you that you're not shifting nice. So it is a Yamaha through and through. So it is I would definitely consider this in the higher gears. It's pretty smooth. You know, once you get out, wind out a second, you get into third and fourth, kind of no different from any other bike. But in those lower registers where it's really grunty, it will not forgive you. And I would say, you know, that guys that ride it on the dirt and ride it hard on the dirt, they probably like it for that reason, right? Why? Because you can blip the throttle, you can get a little bit of the rear wheel spinning if you're going to get around a turn. It's got that low end grunt, right? But on the street, you know, if you're just riding it kind of casually, you have to be very mindful of that grunt on the street, very much so. I don't think that's either a positive or a negative. I think it's just something to be aware of if you buy this bike. You know what I mean? That it is, it's got a little bit of an attitude. This bike's got a little bit of an attitude, for sure. It's easy to work on, man. The bike is really, I have to say, it's really easy to work on. Everything's really pretty straightforward. Everything's really basic. You want to wrench, if you like wrenching on your bike, you like doing stuff to your bikes, I think that you will enjoy working on the Tenere. There's a lot of room to work. Again, it's not overly complicated. It doesn't have a lot of complicated electronics. You know, it doesn't have a lot of stuff crammed in like tight areas or anything like that. So yeah, I definitely consider that a positive. If your bike is easy to work on, it's definitely a positive. So some of the things to be aware of that I don't think are either positive or negative, or could be positive or negative depending on what your opinion is. So one that you guys have heard me talk about excessively and that I just sort of referred to, this bike stock is a tall mother effer. It is a tall bike, really tall. So get that in your head. If you buy this bike and you are, you know, like I said, under, you know, if you're under 5'10", you know, be prepared for a really tall bike. Item number 2 that you should be aware of if you buy this bike, like I referred to earlier, it is a typical Yamaha. And it is twitchy. That doesn't mean it's bad. That doesn't mean it's mean. That doesn't mean it's dangerous. It's just the character of the bike. It's a twitchy bike. Just be aware of that if you buy this bike. It makes the bike a hell of a lot of fun to ride, for sure. But it can also bite you in the ass if you're not careful. So just be careful with that. It is a typical twitchy Yamaha. Oh, one other thing that is probably, you know, again, one of those neutral items to be aware of. The bike uses tubed tires, okay? It has spoked rims and it uses tubes. Again, don't know how I feel about this. It means that if you get a flat out on the road or out in the forest, you ain't plugging it. You got to change the tire and take it off the bike. So that is something to consider with this bike. And what goes hand in hand with that is the bike does not come stock with a center stand. If you're a motocross guy, you've been dealing with that for years, you're probably not going to sweat that. If you're coming from the street like I am, where you can simply plug a flat, that's not going to work on this bike. So just be aware of that. I guess another thing to be aware of that's in the neutral category, and I think I alluded to this a little bit, is the stock tires on the bike are not really that great. They're good on the street, no question there. You can definitely carve on the street with the stock Pirellis. They're really good on asphalt. I still have the rear Scorpion on. It feels great on the road. It grabs really well, and it's not too bad off-road. But the front Pirelli off-road, just awful, man. It didn't help me at all. I mean, I'm not a seasoned off-road rider, and that Pirelli did not make my life any easier. That is for damn sure. So how do I summarize? What are my feelings about this bike I've got 1,000 miles on it. I'm out for today, so I'll have over 1,000 miles. I'll have like 1,100 miles on it as of today. I've owned it since October. I've crashed it. I've tweaked it. I've modified it. I've bitched about its height. And I've gotten to make better friends with it. How do I feel about it? Well, I still feel positive. It's a fun bike to ride. I'm really enjoying myself out here on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. The bike's fantastic. You know, it's a joy to ride. It's a fun bike to ride. I don't want to give anybody the negative impression that they shouldn't buy this bike. But I just think, to be an educated consumer, like, I'm not a Yamaha fanboy. I'm not any brand fanboy. I'm going to come on. I think what makes my vlog useful, especially to people who I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that will come and watch this who aren't necessarily subscribers to my channel. I want to give you an honest review on this bike, especially if you're thinking about, you know, parting ways with $10,000. Yeah, the Tenere is a great bike. To sum it up, you know, I don't think it's worth all the hype. I think it's a cool bike. I think you definitely, if you got it in your gun sights that you want to buy it, I wouldn't say not consider it, but I would say definitely do your homework. You know, go through some of the points that I made, you know, verify them with other people and other riders, do some research on it, and hopefully it helps you in your decision on whether you want to commit to the bike. I have no regrets in buying this bike. I think it's a great bike. It's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to taking my adventure riding class next week and putting it through the paces a little bit and see what it can do. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. So that's my vlog for this weekend, this lovely Saturday in New Jersey. Hope you all ride safe. Hope you all have a great weekend. And once again, if you have any other questions I didn't answer, feel free to direct message me on Instagram. And everybody ride safe. Peace.